Take it all the way up to 1.7. Yeah. Okay, so this is the SL2-S, and let's hit record. And at f3.5, this is showing, the SL2-S anyway, is showing that it's just a little, you know what, let me stop. Now what I'm going to do at the same time is I'm going to take another look at the, Hey everybody, I'm Hugh Brownstone for Three Blind Men and an Elephant, and today I want to talk to you briefly about the high ISO performance of Leica's brand new SL2-S. It's great. Better than the SL2, as good or better at ISO 50,000 than Sony's brand new A7S III. For Three Blind Men and an Elephant, I'm Hugh Brownstone. See you next time. I'm kidding, but... Kidding about what? I'm kidding about this being brief. But how's that for a kick in the teeth? Because even after allowing for minor differences in t-stop values across half a dozen different lenses attached to as many bodies, allowing for minor differences in ambient light leaking from a small basement window 20 feet from our test scene over the course of just a few minutes, allowing and testing for more significant differences due to magnification to create the same object size in the frame to compensate for differing megapixel counts, allowing for I'm not quite sure how significant differences in the way manufacturers calculate ISO, or implement what are ostensibly the same metering modes, after using false color and luma parades in an effort to make those adjustments, and learning the limits of how much time I am willing to spend pixel peeping for an ISO so high I'll never use it, and 99% of us 99% of the time won't either. But recognizing these two tools sometimes confounded what I thought I saw with my own eyes. And finally, after going crazy pixel peeping, luma parade, and false color pattern scrutinizing, deciding to put myself out of my misery by applying a heuristic like, hey, if the A7S III is at least one stop better than the SL2-S, which is what I assumed going into the test, it ought to look as good at ISO 100,000 as the SL2-S at 50,000, and finding out to my astonishment, the A7S III looked a lot worse just one stop faster. Oh, and then showing Claudia a pile of side-by-side comparisons in Lightroom in which she picked out the lower noise image in each pair, and every single one of her picks was the SL2-S. I'm talking about the SL2-S versus the aforementioned Sony A7S III, my own Leica SL2, a Leica M10-P, a Panasonic Lumix S5 and S1R, a Nikon Z6 II, a Canon R5 and an R6. And also going outside to shoot video at ISO 50,000 in the real world, lit only by the moon, the stars, and Christmas lights in our neighbors' front yards. Happy, healthy, merry, everyone. Here's to a 2021 that has to be a lot better than the we just went through. I have a lot to say. But before I say it, what do you see? Pause the video here long enough to grab something to record your pick in each of the following image pairs, A or B, for lower noise. These are the same pairs Claudia reviewed. Oh, wait. Ready? Here we go. Here's a list of what was what. What were your results and thoughts? Please let me know by dropping a comment in the comments section below this video. But before we go any further, I do want to give a shout out to Squarespace for making this episode possible. You've heard me say it before, but I'm happy to say it again. It's not simply that I think Squarespace is the place to go for all of your website needs. It's that we've been using Squarespace to do just that for our own business over the last 5 or 6 years. Squarespace requires no coding, offers absolutely beautiful customizable templates to get you up and running in a matter of hours or even minutes, provides excellent customer service for when you get stuck, and allows you to grow without growing pains. We use it for all of our website, email, e-commerce, customized domains, appointment scheduling, even shipping with the ShipStation plugin. It just plain works. I always say Squarespace is really perfect for any small to mid-sized business, but lately I've been thinking how important it is, especially for content creators in particular, to go beyond Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter for showcasing their work. Duh. A beautiful custom website allows your work to really shine with the detail and tonality you just can't get on social media platforms, and Squarespace is a perfect tool for that. So, check them out at www.squarespace.com/Hugh for a free trial. You don't need to provide a credit card to get started. And if you like what you see and want to move forward, save 10% at checkout on your first order by using the discount code Hugh. Thanks, Squarespace. This is what else I want to tell you. 1. All of this testing, along with a single image Leica shared with me during our Zoom call ahead of the launch, which I refused to mention in my first video, by the way, on the SL2-S, because much as I love Leica and both like and have respect for every single one of the people there I've ever met, it just seemed so implausible to me that image quality could be that good at 64,000 ISO. 64,000 ISO, though I changed my mind once I was able to see it in real life via an 11 by 17 inch print they sent me, this one. Have convinced me that we've reached an inflection point where every full-frame mirrorless ILC manufacturer has at least one 20 or 24 megapixel model which performs at ISO 50,000 within spitting distance of the best among them. Further, that distance can be narrowed or eliminated in post. And ISO 50,000 is usable. For a guy who, back in the day, thought pushing Tri-X in the darkroom to ASA 1200 by using Accufine was esoteric, and who has never shot above ISO 12,800 in New York City, this is revelatory. 2. The 24 megapixel SL2-S, Panasonic Lumix S5, Nikon Z6 II are especially close. Hold that thought. 3. Above ISO 50,000, in video anyway, the SL2-S only goes to 50,000 in video, 100,000 in stills. The increase in noise and degradation in fine detail I saw from what I consider the performance benchmark in 4K video hybrids, Sony's A7S III, are dramatic and pretty much make footage shot that high unusable. Except when what is unfolding in the footage is so compelling that it doesn't matter. 4. All of the cameras I tested are significantly better at high ISOs than even the very highest scoring full-frame cameras of just a decade ago. And these new cameras go a lot higher. When I say the very highest scoring cameras back then, I'm talking about DxOMark scores for the launched in 2008 $9,000 24.5 megapixel Nikon D3X and the $2,700 20.1 megapixel Canon 5D Mark II, which, by the way, was my daily driver for 6 years. The D3X and 5D2 scored 1992 and 1815 respectively, sports scores, though they topped out at ISO 1600 up to 6400 extended and 6400 ISO up to 25,000 extended respectively. I understand that DxOMark has its detractors. I understand that a more thorough review than mine would have run up through every full stop increase in ISO, would have discussed what I believe to be dual gain sensor tech, yada, yada, yada. But I don't need that to tell me what I'm now sharing with you. Use the information as you will. I'm just too cranky to go through all of that. 5. But what I think often gets lost in breathless discussions about high ISO is that you can't for a moment think you're still shooting with 14 or 15 stops of dynamic range or maintaining color fidelity. At ISO 50,000, we're talking more like 3 or 4 stops of DR, which, put differently, dramatically lowers the contrast of a scene. Hold that thought too. And color casts can get funky, especially with cameras sporting sensors of just a year or two ago, as you've already seen. Therefore, 6, I think it's 6, don't lose sight of the power of lighting your scene. If you can shoot at or near base ISO and make it look like you're shooting in low light, even better if you don't have to make it look that way, the difference in image quality is extraordinary. Like this. So I think we're up to 7, which, now that we're talking about it, reminds me to tell you that one of the 2 most compelling use cases for shooting RAW these days is high ISO shooting, because JPEG noise reduction leads to incredibly smeary, usually pretty ugly results like this. Which, once again, may not matter at all if the image itself is compelling enough and doesn't demand that the viewer looks too closely. 8. Even when you aren't shooting only by the illumination of Christmas decorations, high ISO performance is still important when you need much greater depth of field or are otherwise constrained to a small maximum aperture, like, say, Canon's new 600 and 800 f11s. Take this photo I shot more than a decade ago with my Leica M8 and Summicron M35, 1/30th of a second, wide open at f2, ISO 1250. It has hung on a wall in our home for years, even though it's underexposed, not particularly sharp, and noisy. I love it anyway. Back then, the 10.2 megapixel APS-H M8 topped out at ISO 2500. With the SL2-S, I could shoot that exact same frame at f5.6, ISO jacked up to 10,000, same 1/30th of a second, now fortified by the SL2S's IBIS. It would be a much cleaner image with much greater tonality and still better dynamic range, I think. And with that brilliant 5.7 million .EVF and exposure assists like peaking, but most especially magnification. I don't really rely on peaking anymore. On top of the IBIS system, much sharper. Even if I use the exact same lens, because I could see the shot clearly enough to nail manual focus. Like this. Though, hey, I was so psyched I could focus that well and the noise was so not an issue that I didn't care about changing the exposure to protect the moon and pull up the shadows in post. Oh well, which leads me to 9. The one fly in the ointment for low-light shooting with the SL2-S is its contrast detect only autofocus system. Now, to be fair, the SL2S's AF is far superior to the AF in the original SL, but as the amount of light available to any sensor decreases, so does dynamic range and therefore contrast. Low contrast is a problem for all autofocus systems, but it is even more a problem for contrast detect only systems like the one in the SL2S, in fact, all L-mount Alliance cameras. For me, The answer is manual focus, even with autofocus lenses. Fortunately, Leica's Summicron SL lenses have wonderful feel and precision when set to manual, as they should for the price. So, finally, 10. Taken in toto. And as I said earlier, I've changed my mind. We can use ISO 50,000. It opens up an entirely new set of opportunities for seeing real life, and I, for one, will be exploring them. Let me wrap up my take on life at ISO 50,000 this way for now. I'm excited to explore real life at ISO 50,000, and the SL2-S is a wonderful partner for it. It's better than the SL2 at ISO 50,000, and at the same object size within a frame, as good or better than even the Sony A7S III, which so surprised me that I spent days trying to prove myself wrong, and when I couldn't, trying to figure out why I might be right. I did learn that when one equalizes for magnification, the noise levels between the SL2-S and the A7S III appear to be just about the same, which one might expect if both sensors use the same technology, including dual gain, if not the same pixel count or pitch. I would have preferred to include a debayered M10 or Q2 monochrome in the mix directly as well, but I couldn't make that happen in the time frame. I think it's fair to say that the SL2-S is as good or better in the real world than any full-frame, full-color camera out there today, within a margin of error to allow for the different notions of what ISO means to different manufacturers, small differences in metering and lighting during my tests, though I did notice slightly more color noise in the SL2-S than some of the other cameras at 50,000 ISO. Then again, it's easy enough to correct in post. I didn't see any color noise on the SL2-S at 25,000 ISO. It is the case as well that colors are better than I expected them to be across all of the newest Bayer-censored cameras, the SL2-S, the Panasonic S5, the Nikon Z6 II, the Sony A7S III, the Canon EOS R5 and 6. When you add it all up, in fact, not that I really care all that much about technology per se, but still the business implications are interesting. It's hard not to conclude that A, since this is a backside illuminated sensor, B, Tower Jazz doesn't do BSI as far as I know, C, it is unlikely that Canon is in a position to sell their sensor tech yet to other camera companies, and D, it sure looks to me like the SL2-S has the same noise pattern as Sony's very latest sensor in the A7S III and the S5 and the Z6 II. All of these cameras, save the Canons, are sporting some variant of Sony's newest sensor tech, likely newer than that of the A7 III, because they are doing things in video, anyway, that the A7 III sensor either cannot, or perhaps cannot within the current body's ability to dissipate heat. Which makes the fact that the SL2-S has no recording limit interesting. We'll come back to that another time. No matter, all of them now join Sony in making shooting at ISO 50,000, stills or video, a practical reality. And it strikes me that the market is quickly evolving to a place where Sony's very best sensors will be, if they aren't already, available to all at a sufficiently economical price point that they will be embraced. And non-Sony sensors will achieve parity with Sony sensors. Though I do wish the L-mount Alliance would either embrace phase detect autofocus or deliver on the promise of parity using contrast detect only systems at the high ISOs of which these cameras are now capable, which would be good things for all of us, because then it will stop being about electronics and instead perhaps a return to ergonomics. Or maybe just taking the picture. Until someone takes a lead in stuffing computational imaging into dedicated cameras at the level of smartphones, and then the arms race begins all over again. This episode was brought to you by Squarespace. For all of your website needs, visit www.squarespace.com/Hugh for a free trial. And if you decide to move forward, use the discount code Hugh at checkout to receive 10% off your first order. Thanks, Squarespace. If you like what you've seen here today, please give a thumbs up, subscribe, join the conversation below, because this is an incredible audience. If you'd like a copy of our Streets of New York, the book, head over to www.3bmep.com/books. If you'd like to schedule a one-on-one video session with me for a portfolio review, explore or hone your artistic voice, select gear, and more, sign up at www.3bmep.com/booking. Finally, consider supporting our work by using our no-cost-to-you affiliate links down below, picking up some official Three Blind Men and an Elephant swag at 3bmep.threadless.com, sending coffee money via PayPal, or best of all, join us as a patron over at Patreon. However you choose to support us, as always, we thank you for it.